Some cars were too bold, too rare, or just too ahead of their time, and history made sure we forgot them. These 12 American machines had the power, the style, and the potential to be legends, yet they vanished without a trace. Who erased them? Why were they forgotten? And how did we let these beasts slip away? Get ready to uncover the lost icons of American automotive history. The 1935 Stout Scarab was a car unlike anything the world had ever seen. A futuristic design that seemed more like an Art Deco spaceship than an automobile. Created by aviation engineer William Bushnell Stout, this remarkable vehicle was decades ahead of its time, pioneering ideas that wouldn't become mainstream until the 1980s or even later. Often referred to as the world's first minivan, the Scarab was more than just a quirky concept. It was a radical rethinking of what a car could be, offering luxury, practicality, and an unmatched sense of style. At a time when American cars were still defined by long hoods, upright grilles, and running boards, the Stout Scarab broke all the rules. Instead of a traditional three-box design with a separate engine compartment, passenger cabin, and trunk, the Scarab featured a streamlined, single-volume shape that prioritized aerodynamics and interior space. The body was rounded and futuristic, with smooth, unbroken lines and minimal ornamentation. The fenders were integrated into the body, and the wheels were partially covered, enhancing its sleek, flowing appearance. Compared to the boxy Fords and Chevrolets of the 1930s, the Scarab looked like something out of a science fiction magazine, something that might float above the road rather than drive on it. This revolutionary design wasn't just about aesthetics, it had a profound effect on the car's functionality as well. One of the biggest innovations was its rear engine layout, a choice that was practically unheard of in American cars at the time. The engine, a Ford flathead V8, was mounted at the rear, driving the back wheels through a modified transmission. This layout freed up the front of the car, eliminating the need for a bulky hood and allowing for a shorter overall length while still providing an incredibly spacious cabin. The rear engine design also meant there was no need for a drive shaft running through the middle of the car, allowing for a completely flat floor. This simple but crucial change laid the foundation for a more comfortable and flexible interior, one that was more reminiscent of a living room than an automobile. Inside, the Stout Scarab was nothing short of revolutionary. Instead of the standard fixed bench seats found in most cars of the era, the Scarab featured a fully modular interior with individual swiveling armchairs that could be rearranged to suit the occupants' needs. The rear passengers could face forward or rotate their seats to create a lounge-like atmosphere, while a small fold-out table in the center allowed for meals, card games, or work on the go. There was no conventional dashboard on the passenger side, further emphasizing the sense of openness. The entire experience of sitting inside the Scarab was unlike anything else on the road. It was less like riding in a car and more like traveling in a mobile office or a private luxury train car. William Stout had a vision for the future of personal transportation, and the Scarab was his attempt to bring that vision to life. A former aircraft designer, Stout was fascinated by efficiency, aerodynamics, and comfort. He believed that cars should be designed for their occupants first and foremost, rather than conforming to outdated traditions. His aviation background was evident in every aspect of the Scarab, from its lightweight aluminum body construction to its enclosed airplane-inspired cockpit. He even envisioned future versions of the car featuring unibody construction and air suspension, concepts that wouldn't become widespread for many years. Despite its groundbreaking design, the Stout Scarab never had a chance to change the automotive world. The car was simply too radical for the 1930s, and its production process was far too expensive. Each Scarab was built almost entirely by hand, with custom craftsmanship that made it far more costly than a standard luxury car of the era. While a Cadillac or a Packard could be bought for around $1,500, the Scarab's estimated price was closer to $5,000, an astronomical sum during the Great Depression. It's believed that only 9 examples were ever built, making it one of the rarest automobiles in history. The high cost wasn't the only obstacle. The Scarab's unusual styling and unconventional layout were simply too much for the car-buying public to accept. People in the 1930s were accustomed to traditional designs, and the Scarab's smooth, unadorned body and lack of a prominent front grille made it look alien compared to the ornate, chrome-laden sedans of the era. Additionally, the idea of a car being designed for comfort and interior space, rather than sheer mechanical performance, was a concept that few people could grasp at the time. By the early 1940s, the Stout Scarab had faded into obscurity, and with America's entry into World War II, any further development of the concept came to a halt. William Stout himself continued to innovate in other fields, including aviation. The 1961 Muntz Jet was one of the most ambitious and unusual American cars of its era, a four-seat luxury sports car built not by a major automaker, but by a flamboyant businessman who believed he could outdo Detroit at its own game. Earl Madman Muntz was already famous for selling used cars and televisions with wild, over-the-top advertising. But when he turned his attention to the automotive world, he created something truly unique. The Muntz Jet was a high-performance, high-style grand tourer with a powerful Lincoln V8, advanced engineering for the time, and a level of exclusivity that made it a genuine competitor to European sports cars. But despite its promise, the car was ultimately doomed by its own excess. Muntz lost money on everyone he built, and production was cut short before it ever had a chance to reach its full potential. The Muntz Jet actually had its origins in an earlier car, the Curtiss Craft Sport, designed by legendary race car builder Frank Curtiss. Curtiss was best known for his Indy 500 winning race cars, but in the late 1940s, he experimented with creating a high-performance road car based on his racing expertise. His Curtiss Craft Sport was a sleek two-seat roadster with a lightweight chassis, advanced suspension, and a Cadillac V8 under the hood. It was fast, well-built, and ahead of its time, but Curtiss struggled to find buyers, and only a handful were made. Enter Earl Muntz. Seeing potential in Curtiss's design, Muntz bought the rights to the car in 1950 and immediately set about transforming it into something more luxurious and marketable. He stretched the wheelbase to accommodate a second row of seats, making it one of the few true four-seat sports cars of the era. He also made major refinements to the car's styling, adding a removable hardtop, a feature that predated the Ford Thunderbird by several years, upgrading the interior with plush leather and fitting it with a more powerful Lincoln V8. The result was the Muntz Jet, a stylish, high-speed personal luxury coupe that could comfortably seat 4 adults while delivering performance on par with the best American and European sports cars of the time. Under the hood, the Muntz Jet was a beast. Early models used a Cadillac 331 cubic inch V8, while later cars were powered by a 337 cubic inch Lincoln V8, producing around 160 horsepower. That might not sound like much today, but in the early 1950s, it was enough to push the Jet to speeds of over 120 mph, faster than many Corvettes and Thunderbirds that would follow years later. The car featured a unique combination of body-on-frame construction with lightweight aluminum panels, helping keep the weight down despite its size. Muntz also fitted the car with a custom-tuned suspension and 4-wheel hydraulic drum brakes, making it one of the better-handling American cars of its time. Inside, the Jet was all about luxury. The cabin was covered in leather, with a full dashboard of aircraft-style gauges and a high-end radio, one of Muntz's signature touches. Unlike most sports cars of the time, which were designed primarily for speed, the Jet was intended for long-distance cruising in comfort. It had a spacious, well-appointed interior, with seating for 4, making it more practical than its European competition while still delivering thrilling performance. Despite its impressive features, the Muntz Jet faced an uphill battle. It was expensive to build, costing far more per unit than Muntz could realistically charge customers. Muntz, being the showman that he was, insisted on adding top-tier materials and advanced technology. But these decisions only drove up costs. The car was priced at around $5,000, more than a Cadillac or a top-of-the-line Chrysler. But even at that price, Muntz was losing money on every sale. The low production volume meant there were no economies of scale to help reduce costs, and by 1954, Muntz had no choice but to shut down production after building just 198 cars. In many ways, the Muntz Jet was a car ahead of its time. It combined elements of sports cars, grand tourers, and luxury coupes into a single package. something that wouldn't become common until the 1960s with cars like the Ford Thunderbird and Buick Riviera. It was also one of the first American cars to feature a removable hardtop, predating later innovations by major manufacturers. But despite its innovations, the Jet was simply too costly and too niche to survive in the competitive American market. Today, the Muntz Jet is an incredibly rare collector's item, with surviving examples fetching high prices at auctions. It remains a fascinating piece of automotive history, not just because of the car itself, but because of the man behind it. Earl "Madman" Muntz may have been known for his wild marketing stunts, but he was also a visionary who saw the potential for a uniquely American grand tourer before anyone else did. If circumstances had been different, the 1971 Plymouth GTX 440+6 was one of the last great muscle cars before insurance rates, emissions regulations, and fuel crises began choking the life out of American performance machines. It was Plymouth's high-performance luxury muscle car, positioned as a more upscale alternative to the wildly popular Roadrunner. But despite its superior build quality, more refined interior, and a lineup of ferocious big-block engines, the GTX was overshadowed by its cheaper and more famous sibling. In its most potent configuration, the legendary 440+6, the GTX was a tire-melting, torque-heavy beast that could hold its own against the best muscle cars of the era. But only a handful were built, making it a rare and underappreciated classic today. By 1971, the golden age of muscle cars was beginning to show signs of strain. Government safety and emissions regulations were tightening, insurance companies were cracking down on high-horsepower cars, and rising gas prices were making big-block muscle cars less attractive to buyers. But that didn't stop Plymouth from giving the GTX one final shot at greatness. The 1971 model featured an all-new body design with Plymouth's fuselage styling, giving it a more streamlined and aggressive look. The wide stance, sculpted body lines, and menacing front grille made the GTX one of the most imposing muscle cars of the early 70s. Under the hood, the standard GTX came equipped with the formidable 440 cubic inch Super Commando V8, producing a respectable 300 horsepower. But for those who wanted even more raw power, Plymouth offered the 6-barrel setup, 3 Holley 2-barrel carburetors, feeding air and fuel into the 440, boosting its output to a factory-rated 390 horsepower and a monstrous 490 lb-ft of torque. These numbers were conservative, and real-world performance suggested the actual output was closer to 410-420 horsepower. Paired with a heavy-duty 4-speed manual transmission, or the bulletproof Torque Flight Automatic, the GTX 440+6 could rocket from 0 to 60 mph in just over 5 seconds and cover the quarter mile in the high 13-second range, faster than many big-block Mustangs, Camaros, and even some Hemi-powered Mopars of the time. One of the most distinctive features of the GTX 440+6 was the optional air grabber hood, which added an extra layer of intimidation. At the push of a switch inside the cabin, a scoop would pop up from the hood, gulping in cold air and sending it straight to the carburetors. This not only improved performance, but also created one of the most menacing visuals in muscle car history. Imagine sitting at a stoplight, hearing the deep growl of a big block Mopar, and watching that air grabber scoop rise up like a beast about to attack. Inside, the GTX separated itself from the more budget-friendly Roadrunner with a more refined and luxurious interior. Bucket seats, a center console, and wood grain trim gave the cabin a more premium feel, making the GTX a gentleman's muscle car. While the Roadrunner was designed to be a stripped-down, no-frills street brawler, the GTX provided a blend of comfort and brute force, appealing to buyers who wanted both performance and sophistication. But despite all of its impressive features, the GTX was fighting an uphill battle in 1971. The muscle car market was shifting, and buyers were becoming more price-conscious. The Roadrunner, which shared the same platform and many of the same engine options, was cheaper and had a more recognizable name, stealing most of the attention from the GTX. Insurance premiums were skyrocketing for high-horsepower cars, making the GTX an expensive choice for performance enthusiasts. As a result, sales plummeted. Plymouth only built 2,942 GTXs in 1971, and of those, just 625 were equipped with the 440+6 engine. An even smaller number, only 135, came with the 440+6 and a 4-speed manual transmission, making them some of the rarest and most desirable Mopars of the era. After 1971, Plymouth discontinued the GTX as a standalone model. It would return in 1972 as an option package for the Roadrunner, but by then the muscle car era was fading fast. Today, the 1971 Plymouth GTX 440+6 is a rare and highly sought-after collector's car. While Hemi-powered Mopars tend to get most of the attention, the 1969 Ford Torino Talladega was one of the most purpose-built muscle cars ever created, designed with a singular goal in mind: to dominate NASCAR. Unlike many of its muscle car contemporaries, which were built for the street and adapted for racing, the Talladega was engineered from the ground up as a track weapon. With just enough street-going versions produced to satisfy NASCAR's homologation requirements, it was one of the most advanced and underrated Ford performance machines of the late 60s, but it was quickly forgotten, overshadowed by the outlandish Dodge Charger Daytona and Plymouth Superbird that followed it. By the late 1960s, NASCAR had become an all-out war for speed. Dodge and Plymouth were experimenting with aerodynamics, trying to create cars that could break the 200 mph barrier. Ford, determined to stay competitive, needed a car that could slice through the air more efficiently than the standard Torino. The result was the Torino Talladega, named after the newly constructed Talladega Superspeedway, where high-speed aerodynamics would play a critical role in competition. At first glance, the Talladega looked like a regular Torino, but closer inspection revealed a series of subtle yet crucial modifications designed for high-speed stability. The front end was completely reworked, featuring a stretched and reshaped nose that extended the car's length by 5 inches. Unlike the upright grille of the standard Torino, the Talladega's front fascia was sloped and smoothed out, reducing drag and helping the car cut through the air more efficiently. The bumper was cleverly modified, wrapping around and blending seamlessly into the body, a design trick that predated similar aerodynamic enhancements used in later NASCAR machines. Under the hood, Ford equipped the Talladega with its most potent street-legal power plant at the time, the legendary 428 Cobra Jet V8. Rated at 335 horsepower on paper but widely believed to produce well over 400 in reality, this big block engine delivered monstrous torque and serious straight-line speed. Paired with a C6 automatic transmission, a requirement for all Talladegas, the Cobra Jet could push the car deep into the 13-second range in the quarter mile, making it one of the fastest factory-built Fords of the era. To enhance handling and stability at high speeds, Ford made additional tweaks under the skin. The frame was reinforced, the suspension was stiffened, and a special 3.251 rear axle ratio was selected to balance acceleration with top-end speed. Wider rear tires helped improve traction, and the car's overall stance was subtly altered to provide better aerodynamics and weight distribution on oval tracks. Ford had every intention of using the Torino Talladega to dominate NASCAR, but to meet homologation rules, they needed to build at least 500 street-legal versions. In total, Ford ended up producing just 750 units, making it one of the rarest factory-built muscle cars of the time. Available in just 3 colors, Royal Maroon, Wimbledon White, and Presidential Blue, each Talladega came with a no-nonsense, race-inspired interior that prioritized function over flash. On the track, the Talladega was a force to be reckoned with. It won 29 NASCAR races in 1969 alone, helping Ford secure the manufacturer's championship. Richard Petty, who had famously driven for Plymouth, defected to Ford for the 1969 season because he saw the Talladega's potential as an unstoppable race car. However, the Torino Talladega's time at the top was short-lived. Just a few months after its introduction, Dodge and Plymouth struck back with the radical Charger Daytona and Superbird, which featured massive rear wings and extended nose cones that made the Talladega's aerodynamic improvements seem tame by comparison. These Mopar winged warriors would go on to break speed records and steal the spotlight, relegating the Talladega to the background of muscle car history. Today, the Torino Talladega is one of the rarest and most underappreciated NASCAR homologation specials ever built. With fewer than 750 produced and many lost to time or racing duty, surviving examples are highly sought after by collectors who recognize their historical significance. While it may not have had the outlandish looks of the Daytona or Superbird, the Talladega was a brutally effective race car in its own right, proving that sometimes the most dangerous threats are the ones that fly under the radar. The 1956 Continental Mark II was Ford's most extravagant attempt to redefine American luxury. A car designed not just to compete with Cadillac and Chrysler's Imperial, but to challenge the very best European marques, including Rolls-Royce and Bentley. Built under the newly revived Continental name, which had been dormant since the original Lincoln Continental of the 1940s, the Mark II was not just a luxury coupe. It was an aspirational statement, a machine meant to prove that an American company could produce a vehicle every bit as exclusive, refined, and meticulously crafted as its European counterparts. At a time when Detroit's luxury cars were defined by tail fins, flashy chrome, and ever-growing dimensions, the Continental Mark II took a different approach. Its design was deliberately understated, with a long, flowing silhouette, minimal trim, and elegant proportions. Unlike its more flamboyant contemporaries, the Mark II exuded class without the need for excessive ornamentation. Its restrained beauty gave it an almost European look, and it quickly became a favorite among the ultra-wealthy, including celebrities like Frank Sinatra, Elvis Presley, and Elizabeth Taylor, who had one painted to match the color of her eyes. But the Mark II wasn't just about looks, it was built to an unparalleled level of quality. Unlike other cars of the era, which were often assembled with mass production tolerances, the Mark II was largely hand-built. Every body panel was carefully fitted to ensure perfect gaps, and each car went through an extensive paint process that involved multiple coats of hand-sanded lacquer. Inside, the craftsmanship continued. The cabin was a showcase of luxury, featuring the finest leather upholstery, deep pile carpeting, and real wood or engine-turned aluminum trim. Every switch, every dial, and every piece of hardware was designed to operate with a sense of precision and solidity rarely seen in American automobiles. Under the hood, the Mark II was powered by a 368 cubic inch Lincoln Y-Block V8, producing 285 horsepower, paired with a 3-speed turbo-drive automatic transmission. While not the most powerful engine of the 1950s, it was refined and effortless, allowing the car to cruise at high speeds with minimal fuss. The suspension was tuned for comfort, making the Mark II a grand touring machine in the truest sense, capable of gliding over rough roads while keeping occupants in complete isolation from the outside world. All of this exclusivity and craftsmanship came at an enormous cost. The Mark II was priced at nearly $10,000 in 1956, at a time when the average Cadillac cost around $5,000 and a brand new Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud could be had for less. Ford's goal was not to sell the Mark II in large numbers, but to establish the Continental brand as America's answer to the world's most prestigious automakers. However, there was one major problem. Despite its high price tag, Ford was losing money on every single car. The level of attention to detail and the hand-built nature of the Mark II made mass production impossible. And with only 3,005 examples ever built, the project quickly became a financial disaster. By 1957, Ford had no choice but to pull the plug. The Continental brand was quietly folded back into Lincoln, and the Mark II became a one-generation experiment. It was followed by the much larger and more conventional 1958-60 Lincoln Continental, which, despite its name, had little in common with its predecessor. The dream of an American Rolls-Royce had ended, not because the Mark II wasn't up to the task, but because there simply weren't enough buyers willing to pay for such an exclusive machine. Today, the Mark II remains one of the most fascinating and sought-after American luxury cars of all time. It represents an era when Ford wasn't afraid to dream big, when craftsmanship took precedence over cost-cutting, and when an American automaker truly believed it could build a car that rivaled the very best in the world. While it may have been a financial failure, its legacy as one of the most exquisite automobiles ever built in the United States is undeniable. The 1987 Buick GNX remains one of the most iconic and underrated performance cars in automotive history. A machine that was not only a technological tour de force, but also an embodiment of the muscle car spirit at a time when most of the world had left that era behind. At first glance, the Buick GNX, with its unassuming luxury sedan styling, didn't exactly scream muscle car, but under that conservative exterior was a highly advanced, turbocharged beast that outclassed many of the muscle cars that had dominated the American automotive landscape a decade earlier. In the 1980s, the heyday of muscle cars had long passed. The era of the big block V8 was over, replaced by smaller, more efficient engines driven by the growing focus on fuel economy and emissions standards. By the mid-80s, American automakers had largely shifted their focus away from performance in favor of practicality. The Chevrolet Corvette, once a symbol of American muscle, had evolved into a more refined, sophisticated vehicle, leaving the true muscle cars of the past to fade into history. At this point, it seemed that high-performance cars were no longer the center of attention. But in 1987, Buick decided to break the mold and, with the help of the legendary McLaren engines, developed a car that would put the muscle car era back on the map: the Buick GNX. Unlike many of the V8-powered muscle cars from the 60s and 70s, the GNX was powered by a turbocharged 3.8-liter V6 engine. A surprising choice for a car. It tended to compete with the likes of the Corvette, but the GNX's turbocharged engine was a marvel in its own right. With 276 horsepower and 360 lb-ft of torque, it may have looked modest on paper, but those figures were vastly understated. Many experts believe that the GNX's engine was producing well over 300 horsepower, thanks to its turbocharging system and efficient intercooler setup. The beauty of the turbocharged V6 wasn't just in the raw numbers. It was in the torque, which made the car incredibly quick off the line. With all that power going to the rear wheels, the GNX could go from 0 to 60 mph in just over 5 seconds. An impressive feat for any car, let alone one built by Buick. But straight-line performance was only part of the story. The Buick GNX also excelled in handling and overall driving experience. Buick's engineers worked with McLaren to develop a sport-tuned suspension that included upgraded shocks, a beefier rear axle, and high-performance tires, which helped the GNX handle as well as it accelerated. The car's upgraded braking system, incorporating larger discs and better calibrated calipers, ensured it could stop just as quickly as it could go. In fact, in many ways, the GNX was ahead of its time, featuring the type of performance balance and engineering sophistication that wouldn't become truly widespread in American performance cars until decades later. On paper, the GNX was faster than many of its competitors. In fact, it ran the quarter mile in a blistering 13.4 seconds, quicker than the Corvette of the time. It was a car that was capable of embarrassing V8-powered sports cars on the track, and yet it didn't get the recognition it deserved. One of the main reasons for this was Buick's low production numbers. Only 547 units of the GNX were ever built, ensuring that it remained a rare sight on the road. The car's exclusivity also made it a sort of underground icon, known more among performance enthusiasts and gearheads than the general public. Moreover, the Buick GNX had the misfortune of being branded as a Buick. By the 1980s, Buick was already seen as a brand primarily associated with conservative luxury sedans. The very idea of a Buick capable of challenging sports car legends like the Corvette seemed outlandish to the average consumer. And the car's understated styling, blacked-out trim, hood vents, and sportier suspension did little to scream performance car in a time when styling was as important as speed in selling a car. The GNX simply didn't have the flash and flair of other performance models, which led many enthusiasts to dismiss it outright. Additionally, the public's perception of what constituted a muscle car had shifted by the mid-80s. The term muscle car was often reserved for large displacement, V8-powered vehicles with aggressive, muscular styling and booming exhaust notes. The GNX, with its small displacement turbocharged V6 and more subtle styling, didn't fit the traditional muscle car mold, which led to its lack of recognition during its production run. The general car-buying public was more interested in comfort and fuel efficiency than in raw power, so the GNX didn't get the widespread acclaim it deserved at the time of its release. The lack of attention, coupled with the general apathy towards performance cars in the late 80s, meant that the GNX quickly faded into obscurity. The muscle car era was over, and the American auto industry was focused on new technologies like the 1954 Kaiser Darrin holds a unique place in American automotive history, often overlooked in favor of more widely recognized vehicles like the Chevrolet Corvette. Yet, it was an ambitious and innovative sports car that had the potential to alter the trajectory of American roadsters. Produced by the Kaiser Frazer Corporation, the Darrin's most notable feature was its groundbreaking design, which included a fiberglass body and sliding doors that, in 1954, seemed like something from a science fiction novel. This daring attempt to rival the Corvette ultimately faltered due to financial instability and production challenges, leaving the Darrin as one of the rarest and most enigmatic cars of the era. The Kaiser Darrin was the brainchild of industrialist Henry J. Kaiser, who sought to introduce a true American competitor to the European-style roadsters that were beginning to make their mark on the market. The Darrin's body was constructed from fiberglass, a material that was both lightweight and relatively inexpensive, allowing for a more affordable sports car compared to the traditional steel-bodied designs of the time. This body material would later be widely used in the industry, particularly by Chevrolet with the Corvette, but in 1954 it was a novel and ambitious move. However, the most innovative feature of the Darrin was undoubtedly its sliding doors. At a time when most cars featured traditional hinge doors, the Darrin's doors slid forward into the car's front fenders. This design was both a functional and aesthetic triumph, offering not only a unique visual appeal, but also improving the car's aerodynamic efficiency. The sliding doors were a reflection of the car's forward-thinking design philosophy, making it feel like a futuristic vehicle long before other manufacturers began embracing unconventional features. Under the hood, the Kaiser Darrin was powered by a 161 cubic inch L-head six-cylinder engine that produced about 90 horsepower. While this was not nearly as powerful as the Chevrolet Corvette's V8 engine, the Darrin was a well-balanced and capable roadster. The lightweight fiberglass body combined with the moderate power output allowed the Darrin to achieve a top speed of just over 100 mph, an impressive figure for a car of its time. It wasn't a high-performance muscle car, but rather a refined and stylish grand tourer meant to offer an enjoyable and engaging driving experience, rather than pure speed. Despite its innovative design and solid performance, the Kaiser Darrin was hampered by several critical factors. One of the most significant was the financial instability of the Kaiser Frazer Corporation. By the time the Darrin was introduced, the company was already in trouble, struggling to compete with the larger, more established American automakers. This financial instability, compounded by the relatively high cost of manufacturing a low-volume car like the Darrin, meant that the car was never produced in sufficient numbers to capture the market's attention. The Darrin's design also failed to resonate with the public in the same way the Chevrolet Corvette did. While the Corvette benefited from Chevrolet's vast resources, marketing power, and brand recognition, the Darrin was essentially a boutique offering from a smaller, less well-known company. The American sports car market at the time was still in its infancy, and it took more than a novel design to convince the public to embrace such a radically different car. Moreover, with the Corvette's rising popularity and the limited production of the Darrin, only around 435 units were made. The Darrin failed to make a significant impact in the market, and by the end of 1954, Kaiser Frazer ceased production of the model. The car's rarity and its stunningly unique design have helped preserve the Darrin as a forgotten gem of American automotive history. While the Corvette surged to become the quintessential American sports car, the Darrin quietly faded into obscurity, its promise unfulfilled. Today, however, it is remembered as a visionary car that was far ahead of its time. The sliding doors, fiberglass body, and European-inspired styling set it apart from the sea of similar-looking roadsters, and it stands as an early example of American innovation that was thwarted by circumstances beyond its control. Today, the Kaiser Darrin has become a rare and highly sought-after collector's item. The unique features, such as the sliding doors and the fiberglass construction, continue to fascinate car enthusiasts, and only a handful of surviving examples are left in existence. Despite its lack of commercial success, the Darrin's place in the pantheon of American automotive history is secure, its story one of ambition, innovation, and what might have been. The Darrin's legacy also serves as a reminder of the fragile nature of the American automotive landscape in the mid-20th century, where even the most promising vehicles could be quickly eclipsed. The 1970 Mercury Cyclone spoiler is one of the most underrated muscle cars of its era, a vehicle that blends raw power, performance, and style with NASCAR-inspired engineering. This car is often overshadowed by its more famous counterparts, particularly the Ford Torino Talladega, which had a greater presence in both NASCAR and the muscle car world. Despite its aggressive aerodynamics, potent engine, and unique design, the Cyclone spoiler remains a forgotten gem in the world of classic American muscle cars. Mercury's Cyclone was a performance variant of the Montego, and it had already made its mark in the mid-60s as a sporty option in Mercury's lineup. However, the 1970 Cyclone spoiler was a whole different beast. It was part of Mercury's attempt to capture some of the performance glory of its Ford cousins. And the spoiler variant was designed with aerodynamics and speed in mind, heavily influenced by the needs of NASCAR racing. Its purpose was not just to make a fast car for the street, but to create a high-performance muscle car with a strong racing pedigree. At the heart of the Cyclone spoiler was the 429 Super Cobra Jet V8 engine, a powerhouse that delivered 360 horsepower and 480 lb-ft of torque. This engine was designed for speed, with plenty of muscle to power the car through straightaways and tight corners. The 429 Super Cobra Jet engine was paired with an upgraded suspension and high-performance parts to make the car more capable on the track, and it certainly lived up to the high-performance reputation. This engine configuration helped the Cyclone spoiler race-worthy performance, and while not as well known as the Ford Torino's big block options, it was more than capable of delivering exhilarating speeds and acceleration. One of the unique elements of the Cyclone spoiler was its aggressive aerodynamics. Inspired by the success of the Ford Torino Talladega, the Cyclone spoiler featured a similar front-end treatment with a long sculpted nose designed to improve airflow and reduce drag. This made the spoiler more stable at high speeds, a crucial factor for both racing and street performance. The distinctive rear spoiler, as the name suggests, further contributed to the car's aerodynamic capabilities, improving downforce and handling at high speeds. Despite these features, the Cyclone spoiler never quite reached the fame or recognition it deserved. Much like other Mercury models of the time, it suffered from a lack of brand identity when compared to Ford's more popular offerings. The Cyclone spoiler's production numbers were low, with only 1,000 units produced in total, which only further cemented its status as a rare and often overlooked vehicle. The car also struggled with an image problem, as it was overshadowed by the more iconic muscle cars of the era, including the Chevrolet Camaro, Dodge Challenger, and Ford Mustang, which grabbed most of the spotlight in the muscle car wars. Although the spoiler had NASCAR-inspired features in the performance to match, it was not the same kind of household name as the Ford Torino Talladega. Ford's more mainstream brand had a stronger connection with racing fans, and the Torino Talladega benefited from Ford's massive marketing push. The Mercury Cyclone spoiler, on the other hand, did not enjoy such widespread recognition, and its limited production numbers and the more niche appeal of the Mercury brand kept it from becoming a performance icon like the Mustang or the Plymouth Barracuda. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Cyclone spoiler was its potential. It had all the ingredients of a legendary muscle car: strong engine options, aggressive styling, and a connection to NASCAR's glory years. But its limited production, combined with Mercury's less prominent standing in the performance car market, led to its fall into relative obscurity. The spoiler remains a car that, despite its raw power and performance capabilities, never garnered the fanfare of its Ford counterparts. Today, the 1970 Mercury Cyclone spoiler stands as a rare piece of muscle car history. With fewer than 1,000 examples produced, it is a sought-after collector's item, but it remains largely unknown to the general public. For muscle car enthusiasts and fans of Mercury's performance models, however, the Cyclone spoiler represents the perfect blend of underdog performance and lost potential. It may not have gotten the recognition it deserved back in the day, but in retrospect, the spoiler is a reminder of the vast untapped possibilities that existed within the muscle car era. It was a machine designed for speed and power, and it certainly delivered on those fronts. Unfortunately, it just didn't get the widespread acclaim that its Ford cousins enjoyed. The 1970 Mercury Cyclone spoiler may not be a household name today, but for those in the know, it is a muscle car worth celebrating. A performance-oriented, underappreciated classic that had all the right ingredients, but just couldn't. The 1932 Auburn Speedster 12-160 is one of the forgotten masterpieces of pre-war American automotive history. Built during a time when American automakers were pushing the boundaries of performance and luxury, the 12-160 Speedster embodied the peak of Auburn's engineering prowess. With its striking design, powerful V12 engine, and remarkable speed, the Speedster was a car ahead of its time, but it has largely faded into obscurity, overshadowed by other iconic American cars and the eventual collapse of Auburn itself. The Auburn 12-160 was powered by a 160 horsepower V12 engine, which was an impressive feat in the early 1930s. This V12 engine allowed the Speedster to reach a top speed of 100 mph, a blistering pace for a car of its era. For context, in the early 1930s, the notion of a 100 mph car was still a rarity, with most high-performance cars topping out in the 70-80 mph range. The 12-160 was not just a fast car, it was an engineering marvel, combining raw power with the kind of smoothness and refinement that was typical of Auburn's high-end models. But it wasn't just the engine that set the Auburn Speedster apart, it was the design. Auburn had a reputation for creating cars that were as much about style as they were about speed, and the 12-160 Speedster was no exception. With its flowing Art Deco-inspired lines, wide stance, and gleaming chrome accents, the Speedster looked as fast as it could go. The car's sleek bodywork was complemented by a long, raked grille and the elegant shape of its fenders, which gave the car an aerodynamic, futuristic look. The aesthetic choices of Auburn's designers made the 12-160 Speedster one of the most visually striking cars of its era, embodying the luxury and extravagance of the 1930s. The 12-160 Speedster was also a machine built for performance, equipped with top-of-the-line features that enhanced its driving experience. Its sophisticated chassis and suspension were designed to handle the high speeds, while the luxurious interior, with its rich leather seats and polished wood accents, offered an equally refined environment for those fortunate enough to experience it. This combination of performance and luxury made the Auburn Speedster 12-160 a desirable car among the elite. But unfortunately, its story was one of decline rather than continued success. Auburn was a company that, in the early 1930s, seemed destined for greatness. However, the Great Depression had a devastating effect on the American automotive industry, and Auburn was no exception. Despite producing some of the most advanced and stylish cars of the era, the company struggled to stay afloat as the economic downturn took its toll. By 1937, Auburn was forced to shut down, and with it, the 12-160 Speedster and other cars in the brand's lineup were relegated to history. Despite its speed, power, and beauty, the Auburn 12-160 Speedster never gained the lasting fame of other pre-war American cars. While brands like Cadillac, Packard, and Lincoln went on to create iconic models that are still celebrated today, Auburn's fall from prominence meant that the Speedster was quickly forgotten by the public. The 12-160 became a car admired by collectors and enthusiasts, but largely overlooked by the mainstream, as the company's closure and subsequent fading from the automotive scene left it without the brand recognition that other marques enjoyed. Today, the Auburn 12-160 Speedster is a rare and highly sought-after collector's car, with only a small number of surviving examples. Its combination of performance and elegance makes it a standout in the history of American automobiles, but it remains a relatively obscure relic from an era when American car manufacturers were pushing the limits of what was possible. The Speedster's V12 engine, which could hit 100 mph in 1932, and its breathtaking design are a testament to the ambition and innovation that Auburn brought to the automotive world. However, much like many other forgotten classics, it is a reminder of how even the most impressive vehicles can fade from memory, swallowed by the passage of time and the forces of economic collapse. The 1932 Auburn Speedster 1260 deserves to be remembered as one of the fastest, most stylish American cars of its era, a car that embodied the spirit of innovation and luxury. Yet, despite its remarkable performance and design, it remains one of the great forgotten gems in automotive history, overshadowed by the more famous Marquis and the struggles of a company that couldn't survive the ravages of the Great Depression. For those who know its story, however, the Auburn Speedster remains a true symbol of the golden age of American automotive engineering. The 1966 Oldsmobile Toronado was a groundbreaking vehicle in many respects, setting the stage for future innovation in the automotive world. The Toronado was one of the first true front-wheel drive muscle cars, and its bold design and engineering innovations left a mark on automotive history, even if it never fully earned the recognition it deserved. The car was powered by a 425 cubic inch V8 engine that produced 385 horsepower, a massive amount of power for its time. This gave the Toronado the performance expected of a muscle car, with plenty of torque and acceleration to go along with its futuristic design. But what made the Toronado truly unique was its front-wheel drive layout, a concept that had never been tried in the muscle car world before. Oldsmobile's engineers believed that front-wheel drive could offer better handling and traction, particularly in the winter months, and their vision helped shape the future of automotive technology. The Toronado's front-wheel drive system was paired with an innovative transmission that made for a smooth and reliable driving experience, while the powerful V8 engine provided more than enough speed for the vehicle. With a 0-60 mph time of around 8 seconds, it was quicker than many of its contemporaries, and its 120 mph top speed put it in league with some of the best cars of the era. Despite its performance, however, the Toronado was far more than just a muscle car. It was a luxury vehicle that combined power with refinement. Its interior was spacious and comfortable, with high-quality materials used throughout, and it was designed to cater to the growing demand for comfortable, high-performance vehicles. The Toronado's exterior design was equally ambitious, with sleek lines, a long hood, and a fastback roofline that gave it a futuristic and elegant appearance. Oldsmobile wanted the Toronado to look as advanced as it was, and it succeeded in making the car stand out from the crowd. The Toronado's wide stance and bold front grille created a commanding presence on the road, and it quickly became one of the most unique and visually striking cars in the 1960s. But despite its technical innovation, the Toronado never fully won over muscle car enthusiasts or the broader public. Many people were simply not ready for the idea of front-wheel drive performance, and traditional rear-wheel drive muscle cars like the Chevrolet Chevelle, Ford Mustang, and Pontiac GTO continued to dominate the scene. The Toronado's unconventional layout and its higher price tag also worked against it, as it was often seen as too sophisticated for the traditional muscle car crowd, who prioritized raw power and aggressive styling. Furthermore, the Toronado was a large, heavy car, and while it offered plenty of power, its weight and front-wheel drive layout often meant that it wasn't as nimble or dynamic as other performance cars of the era. For many, the idea of a front-wheel drive muscle car simply didn't resonate, and despite being an engineering marvel, the Toronado was overshadowed by its rear-wheel drive counterparts. As a result, it became something of a historical footnote in the muscle car era, remembered more for its technical innovation than for the cultural impact of other classic muscle cars. The Toronado did, however, pave the way for future front-wheel drive vehicles, including other high-performance models like the 1980s front-wheel drive Pontiac Grand Prix and the front-wheel drive offerings from luxury brands like Audi and Volkswagen. But by the time these cars arrived, the world had already moved on from the muscle car craze, and the Toronado's early promise was largely forgotten. In the years following its release, Oldsmobile did refine the Toronado in various ways, including introducing a more powerful 455 cubic inch V8 in later models. But the initial impact of the 1966 version was never fully realized. With only around 40,000 units sold in its first year, the Toronado's production numbers were modest compared to other muscle cars of the time, and it never became a true icon in the way that the GTO or Mustang did. The 1966 Oldsmobile Toronado remains a fascinating piece of automotive history, a car that was ahead of its time, but ultimately didn't capture the imagination of the public the way it should have. It was a muscle car with a twist, combining high performance with front-wheel drive and offering an entirely new driving experience for its time. While it may not have enjoyed the same widespread success as its rear-wheel drive counterparts, the Tornado's legacy lives on as one of the most innovative cars of the 1960s. It stands as a testament to Oldsmobile's willingness to push the boundaries of automotive design and engineering, even if the market wasn't quite ready for it. The 1905 Chevrolet Cosworth Vega represents one of the most ambitious attempts by an American automaker to break into the European-style sports car market, but it remains one of the most misunderstood and forgotten cars in Chevrolet's history. The concept behind the Cosworth Vega was to take the Vega, a compact economy car, and transform it into something special with the help of a legendary British engineering firm, Cosworth, known for its work in Formula One racing. The result was a car that was both ahead of its time and tragically misaligned with the market. Under the hood, the Cosworth Vega was powered by a 2.0-liter twin-cam, 16-valve inline-4 engine, a design that was rare in American cars at the time. This engine was capable of producing 110 horsepower, which, while modest by today's standards, was a significant jump from the standard Vega's engine offerings. It was capable of propelling the car to a top speed of around 110 mph, which was competitive for the era. The car also featured a 4-speed manual transmission, which added to the sporty appeal. Cosworth's reputation for performance engineering was a key selling point, and the car was designed to be a more refined, performance-oriented version of the Vega, something that could rival European sports coupes like the Datsun 240Z or the Fiat 124 Sport Coupe. But the Cosworth Vega had several problems that kept it from becoming the success Chevrolet hoped for. First, the Vega's reputation for quality issues was a significant hurdle. The Vega had been known for engine problems, rust issues, and poor reliability in its earlier iterations. And even though the Cosworth model featured improvements, it couldn't escape the stigma attached to its base model. The public wasn't eager to buy a sports car that was still fundamentally a Vega, known for being an inexpensive, mass-produced economy car. Another issue was the price. The Cosworth Vega was significantly more expensive than the base Vega, retailing for around $5,500 in 1975, roughly 50% more than the standard model. At this price point, it was competing with more established sports cars from other brands, like the Datsun 240Z and the Triumph TR6, which offered a more proven track record and a stronger brand presence. While the Cosworth Vega's engine was an impressive technical feat, many buyers felt that they could get a more refined sports car for the same money elsewhere. The car's handling, while competent, was also not quite on par with its European competitors. The suspension and chassis were not as well developed as the cars from Datsun or Fiat, and the Vega's compact size and weight made it somewhat less agile and responsive than enthusiasts expected from a true sports car. The interior, while functional, was not as luxurious or refined as some might have liked for a performance model. And despite its sporty aspirations, the Cosworth Vega still retained much of the economy car character, including a relatively basic design and lackluster features. Adding to the Cosworth Vega's downfall was Chevrolet's limited production of the model. Only around 3,500 units were made, far fewer than the company had originally hoped for. The car's low production numbers and limited appeal meant that it quickly faded into obscurity. By the end of 1975, the Cosworth Vega had been discontinued, marking the end of an ambitious but ultimately failed attempt to create a high-performance American sports car in a compact package. Today, the Cosworth Vega is remembered as an intriguing oddity in Chevrolet's history. It remains a rare collectible, particularly for enthusiasts who appreciate its technical innovations and potential as a performance car. But it also serves as a reminder of the challenges faced by American manufacturers in trying to compete with European sports car builders in the 1970s. Despite its high-performance aspirations, the Cosworth Vega never found its place in the market, making it a forgotten chapter in the muscle car era and an example of the high price of ambition when the timing and market conditions are wrong. For those who do appreciate the Cosworth Vega today, it's seen as a rare gem, a sports car that could have been had it been given the right platform, marketing, and timing. In a way, it represents the intersection of American engineering and European sensibilities, an ambitious experiment that failed to materialize as envisioned. And while it never achieved the iconic status of its competitors, the Cosworth Vega still stands as a testament to Chevrolet's boldness and willingness to experiment, even if the execution didn't quite hit the mark. The 1996 Dodge Viper GTS-R is one of those rare instances in automotive history where a car with incredible potential was almost completely overshadowed, despite having all the attributes of a street-dominating performance machine. Dodge's Viper already had a reputation for raw, unrefined power, but the GTS-R version was something else altogether. It was essentially a street-legal version of Dodge's Viper race car, designed to bring the excitement of the racing world to public roads. But due to its limited production and Dodge's relatively low-key marketing of the car, it became a hidden gem that most performance car enthusiasts of the time didn't even know about. The Viper GTS-R was powered by the same 8.0-liter V10 engine that defined the Viper, but this version was tuned for even more power. It produced 450 horsepower, up from the standard Viper's 400 horsepower, and was paired with a 6-speed manual transmission that was as raw as they come. The engine's brutal performance was backed by a lightweight, track-focused design, which featured a more aggressive aerodynamic package to enhance downforce and handling, setting the GTS-R apart from the base Viper. The GTS-R's performance was nothing short of astonishing. With its lightweight construction, optimized aerodynamics, and improved engine output, it was capable of reaching 0 to 60 mph in around 4 seconds, phenomenal for the mid-1990s, and had a top speed of over 180 mph, making it one of the fastest cars of its time. However, unlike its more famous counterpart, the Corvette, or even the Ferrari F355, the Viper GTS-R was never given the widespread recognition it deserved. It wasn't just about the raw numbers. The Viper GTS-R had an aggressive, menacing look, with flared fenders, racing stripes, and a more purposeful stance that reflected its racing pedigree. But Dodge's strategy for the Viper GTS-R was puzzling, to say the least. Unlike the regular Viper, which was heavily marketed, the GTS-R was produced in extremely limited numbers, with only around 100 units being built for the street. This limited production run, combined with Dodge's reluctance to heavily advertise the car, meant that the GTS-R was a well-kept secret among performance car enthusiasts. It was essentially a Viper with racing capabilities dialed up, but without the visibility and hype that would have brought it the attention it truly deserved. The fact that it was largely overshadowed by other performance cars of the time, like the Chevrolet Corvette ZR1 and the Porsche 911 Turbo, didn't help either. Those cars had decades of history, global recognition, and brand loyalty behind them, while the Viper, and especially the GTS-R, was still viewed as a relatively niche and rough-edged American exotic. The lack of exposure was not helped by Dodge's general marketing of the Viper brand. While the regular Viper was already considered one of the most extreme sports cars on the market, its image was still a bit too wild and untamed for mainstream buyers. The GTS-R, despite its racetrack prowess, shared that same untamed reputation, but with even more exclusivity and a price tag to match. As a result, only the most hardcore enthusiasts sought out the GTS-R, and the car remained a rare sight on the streets. Today, the 1996 Dodge Viper GTS-R remains a highly sought-after collector's item, especially among fans of the Viper brand or those who appreciate the raw, unpolished performance that American muscle cars are known for. It's one of the most iconic versions of the Viper that very few people actually experienced, making it a rare piece of performance car history. Its status as a hidden gem means that it often goes unnoticed in discussions about high-performance cars from the 1990s, even though it had all the ingredients to dominate the streets, if only the market had been ready for it. In hindsight, the Viper GTS-R is a reminder of what could have been, a car that had the potential to rival the greatest performance machines of its time, but was ultimately lost in the shadows due to limited production and a lack of widespread exposure. If Dodge had marketed it as aggressively as some of its other models, it might have gained the iconic status it deserved. Instead, it became one of the best-kept secrets of the 90s, a true American performance machine that, despite being hidden away, continues to capture the imagination of automotive enthusiasts today.